It's go time.
Welcome everyone to Third Down Gamble with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Welcome back to the podcast. Don Charbin along with Heath Graham. Heath, the 2025 CFL Combine went through in Regina. A lot of outstanding efforts. Unfortunately, because of circumstances beyond my control, I could not get there, and I was disappointed. But that's life. Sometimes other things happen that you have to put in priority first. But having said that, one of the wishes I thought we were going to have coverage of this live like we have had in the past. Marshall Ferguson doing a ton of work just talking about it and promoting it, but nothing live.
This is really disappointing, and we have had the last couple of combines at least available through streaming where you could check out different parts of it. I believe this is a miss by the CFL. We've seen the coverage of the NFL Combine increase and improve year over year, where it's now one of the biggest non-game related events of the season, and the CFL has failed to keep up. We got lucky, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but we happily had some coverage of it live over the last couple of years, and for it to be dropped this year is a big disappointment.
Yes, I absolutely cannot argue that. The problem I have is, why not state ahead of time that it's not going to be broadcast live? Why not give me the update that due to this issue or that issue or whatever the case may have been, that I would have been informed? It would have been nicer, because I wouldn't have been staring at my computer trying to find it all over the place, whether they were putting it on YouTube, whether they were putting it just on the CFL.ca. I'm not blaming them for everything about this, because sometimes there are circumstances that you can't control technically. I get the feeling that this was a budgetary consideration. Maybe it's something that I will push back. Maybe it's an a Randy Ambrosie commissioner thing, where he and this type of stuff don't get along all that well. Not that I'm saying he's opposed to marketing the league, but this is a great way to promote and market these players, and it was a missed opportunity.
It is, and you can argue that was a budgetary decision, why they didn't do it. At the same time, it's not a huge expense. We're not expecting at this point in time to have a panel of experts dissecting every event of the Combine. We don't necessarily need commentary over top, but just to be able to have eyes on it as a CFL fan and a viewer, to be able to check things out. And you've also got to take into consideration all of these athletes that have families all across the country as well. Again, the expectation isn't for all of them to travel to Regina to see their sons, grandsons, brothers, sisters participate in the CFL Combine. But to allow grandma to sit at home and turn on her computer and be able to watch them, I think is a big moment in that family's football history, and it's taken away by not having a live stream.
There's too much consideration nowadays about the bottom line. How many views did we get? How many people were actually signed up to do this? The problem I have with that is sometimes things are important in and of themselves, that you do it regardless. And the NFL, when they started covering their Combine, it didn't draw that well, but they stuck with it. The NFL Network, now granted, it's a separate entity from the NFL. They've just got licensing rights. They stuck with it. They kept pushing it, and over time it grew. Everything, even the NFL Draft, started as a PBS special way back in the day. It all has to start somewhere. You've got to take your lumps. You've got to learn how to grow with it. This was an opportunity missed, and I just don't get it. If you're going to push these players, if you're going to get more eyes on the game, at every opportunity, put them out there. Even if they're not making rosters, even if they're not getting drafted, at least it's a moment in the sun that they can still look back on and say, there I am on YouTube, and that's me performing the 40.
You talk about starting somewhere and building something, and I think of the streaming coverage of U Sport athletics in this country as well. It's something that now just about every university athletic event in Canada is available to stream through their own networks or through CBC Gem. They've done a great job of showcasing championship finals through their streaming service. I know TSN and Bell Media are the exclusive rights holders to CFL football, but if there's interest there, I think you could even look at some of these other outfits that have the infrastructure in place to show it.
You could have with this, and you bring up the university sports, and U Sport especially has done a great job. In Canada West, I do subscribe to their package that they have, and it's amazing that on any Friday night, I can hop around all over Western Canada to watch any game that I want that is being played. And they have made it worth their while. I don't know what their subscription rate is, but they keep the package running. They're getting better and better as time goes on. The announcing is getting better. You watch a game out of Edmonton, they're fantastic. Calgary, the same thing. You can go to the smaller schools. They're all doing their best. The CFL didn't have to have commentators, and I agree with you. We talked about this last year. Have a camera overhead showing the entire facility, okay, wherever the 40 yards that they're using or 50 yards. Then have one or two people down on the field with wild mics just getting close enough that you could follow somebody, and have one director hitting the buttons and sending that feed out to CFL.ca. That's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever you want to do. Maybe a 3-person job, and you're out of there. Maybe some tech to get that camera up top. Beyond that, that's all you need. Or something akin to that. That's what I just don't understand. It doesn't have to be super high tech. We're just trying to get ourselves a piece of this. Just try to see something.
It sometimes feels like the CFL is taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and there's the push to grow the game across Canada, to reach out to new fans, to engage in different markets, and then something like this comes up that is an easy event, I believe, to showcase, and there's just a failure to do so.
And if you're always driven by the dollar, then you're going to have woes all the time. You have to sometimes accept that you're going to have to lose a little bit to make some. And this isn't a short-term thing. This is a long-term thing. If I was watching Andy Fantuz in the draft, or we did see Trey Ford in the draft, but we also saw him in the Combine, where Andy Fantuz I did not see in the Combine. And Fantuz comes in with some name, but no video that I could see. But Trey Ford comes in. I saw him at the Combine. I know what he did out there. I heard all the commentary that was going around the field. That brings him more to me than just reading a newspaper, or now I guess we consume everything off our computers. But it just brings it as a more meaningful way to engage.
Hopefully, in the years to come, the CFL will come back around and start giving us opportunities to stream or to watch live footage of the Combine.
Well, you've got Pierre-Marc Pelledeau in Montreal, who's got a giant corporation, Videotron, that could do this. Maybe the league has to look at rights packages and start to maybe look at somehow dividing them a little bit so that you get some competition again, where CBC and TSN have that competition. Now, TSN's done a fantastic job through the season, through the preseason, and right through to the Grey Cup. Can't argue it at all. And I don't blame TSN for this. This is not even on their radar. But sometimes with a second network there, you can push a little bit and say, oh, what if they want it? Maybe we should do something about this.
Another part to consider with Bell Media is they own several different channels. It doesn't necessarily have to be something on TSN proper. We've seen, especially during Olympic coverage, which I will say Canada probably has some of the best Olympic coverage in the world because of the cooperation of the networks. But you sometimes have seen, I believe, curling on the Cottage Network, something along those lines, where they will branch out and show it on other options that they have within their portfolio. And this could have been the same thing with the CFL Combine.
Well, you could have put it on TSN 5 or TSN Plus, whichever, and both would have been great. It's just an opportunity missed. And I'm not putting this on TSN. It's not their problem. It's the CFL's. The CFL has got to have... I thought Randy Ambrosie did a lot of great things, but this is one area where he stumbled. They need a Mark Cohan or somebody like that can market the beans out of this league and really start to push the player talent, really start to push the connection with the players, and really start to push this league in a dynamic world where you've got to get eyeballs on you, and one way to do it is to show everything you got.
Hi, this is Jamie Rydell from TSN, producer, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble.
Perhaps another missed opportunity by the league, or certainly some of the personnel employed by CFL teams. Edmonton Elks general manager Ed Hervey had some pretty harsh criticisms for the talent level in the league, specifically Gino Lewis, but in general stating that he does not believe that there are superstar players in the league. What is your reaction when you hear comments like that?
Well, first, it's disbelief. I don't understand how a person in his position would even dare say that. I guess because he is strong-willed and he has opinions about things, he has every right to express them. But when you're a general manager of a team that's trying to reconnect with the fans, and you go out and because you're ticked at a player and say there are no superstars in this league, what kind of service are you doing for that ownership group in Edmonton?
His comments affect a lot of different aspects of the league, in my opinion. As you mentioned, the fans, you've got somebody saying that you don't have superstars, so how do you market in a city where there's supposedly no superstars? Secondly, what message does that give to players and free agents in the CFL? Are they going to want to consider a team that has a general manager that makes those kinds of comments? Ego plays a huge part of the success of professional athletes. And there isn't anybody in the CFL that probably wasn't the best player on their high school or junior football team. They are special talents, and this comment would turn them off. It may, to some degree, invigorate some of his players to prove him wrong and could be a bit of a motivator, but I think it's more of a detractor than it is a motivator for especially potential free agents.
Well, it would make some players pause, although some will, having known him, maybe understand more of the context in which that came from in his way of communicating it. For the outside viewer, the person that doesn't know him that well or the organization that well, you're kind of scratching your head, like, why would you do this, especially at a time when you've got up-and-coming players trying to convince coaches, general managers that you're worth it to be drafted and you can produce and maybe become a star in this league. Now, you can quantify superstar in a million different ways, and it's hyperbole to use it in some ways and not in others. We have sort of conjecturally accepted that if a player is outstanding, they are a superstar. I could point to Doug Flutie. People have pointed to Ronnie Lancaster and George Reed in Saskatchewan, that combination. Damon Allen, Henry Williams. It goes on and on and on. In this league nowadays, wouldn't you think that Willie Jefferson reaches that plateau?
I would think Willie Jefferson. I think Janarian Grant. You talked about Gizmo Williams. He's on pace right now through his first 5 seasons in the league to what Gizmo was throughout his career. I would say that's a superstar. Edmonton alone has a marketable Canadian quarterback that they're trying to establish as well. I don't think Trey Ford would be considered superstar caliber yet, but that's an opportunity to promote somebody in this league. Nathan Rourke achieved superstar level in his first year as a starter. We'll see if he gets back to that as well. But there are players in this league that are phenomenal and deserve the recognition. And I talked a little bit about 2 steps forward, 1 step back. In our last episode, we talked about the opportunity to really present and solidify the Canadian game to Canadian fans. This comment hurts that regard as well.
It does not do anybody really much service. Now, again, he's entitled to his opinion. You can agree with him or disagree with him. That's your choice. But it doesn't do any favors to anybody. And how does the Edmonton ownership group look at this? What does Larry Thompson think, and what does Chris Morris think? Because, again, remember, that team has been struggling at the gate. They want to bring good quality talent in there. And you're telling your fan base that, well, nobody in this league is a superstar. It just doesn't make good economic sense to even spout that in the first place. I know it's about Geno Lewis, and I know he's ticked about everything that happened with him. That's fine, but couch yourself and say, Geno Lewis may not be a superstar, but I've got a bunch that I know that play for my team that I'm happy with. If you do it that way, no one argues with you whatsoever.
It certainly got the attention of the CFL Players Association as well. They have come out against the comments made by Ed Hervey. They've called it insulting and ignorant and are looking for some level of clarification and possibly apology from Ed Hervey and the Elks organization.
He's come back with a clarification saying that superstars are Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan. I will wager with you that there's a generation that are on this earth right now that had never seen either perform anything that they'd ever done, except if they've gone back to YouTube or their parents or grandparents talked about them. You gotta, again, watch your context. There are people out there that are just elite athletes. But to say there are none in this league is a major mistake. And I'm with the CFLPA on this. In fact, they even went to Chris Morris and to the CFL both reporting this. So they're very upset. And that's their constituency as well. And you go to Twitter and follow a bunch of the CFL players, Darnell Sankey, just to name one, who was just livid about this commentary.
He was, and rightfully so. I agree with you. I'm in support of the Players Association in this. I think it's a fire that needs to be put out. And we know Ed Hervey is an outspoken individual. He speaks his mind. He's had a reputation as a hard-nosed player and a hard-nosed general manager. As disappointing as the comments are, maybe they're not that surprising. But again, now you have to play the game of how do you put this into context? How do you bring it back? And how do you regain the respect and the buy-in from the players?
Great question. And let's say the Elks are at home. Team comes in and they've got Ottawa. Eugene Lewis is over there. You got him upset already about how he left Edmonton, but you got a bunch of Red Blacks saying, oh, what do you mean we're not good enough? There's none of us that are really elite over here. Everybody that's going to go into Edmonton is going to have this chip on their shoulder like, you think you're so smart. Well, we're going to prove you wrong.
Bulletin board material is a phrase that gets tossed around quite a bit, and sometimes it can be a very minor comment, something off the cuff that a team can use to motivate. And you're 100% right. I think this is huge motivation for every team going into Edmonton this year to show that general manager that, hey, this team coming in to play against you guys, we're loaded with superstars. For
him to say, I'm done with this, I've got more important things to do, which if there's somebody's feelings that are hurt, well, too bad. That's a sour grapes kind of comment to make. And he got called on it. And I don't know which bothers him more, the fact that him and Geno Lewis don't see eye to eye on much of anything, or that he got called in this comment. Because if anything, Ed Hervey, I don't question his ability or anything like that, but he has taken some missteps in the past, banning the media from the Edmonton locker room when he was GM their first time. And he glibly talked about, that was the young him, this is the older me, I'm much better now. You kind of trip back into something that you shouldn't have really bothered with in the first place. If you don't like what happened, keep it private, keep it between you and his agent, and leave it there. You bring it out in the open, you're opening yourself up. That's your problem.
We've talked a lot about the new regime in Edmonton. They've gone at everything over the last 12 months with a new owner, a new president, a new general manager, a new head coach. There was a lot of positive momentum for that franchise and a lot of people excited about the future of the Edmonton Elks. This just feels like now it's a bit of a shot in the foot and a step back for the team, the organization, and for everything that they had built.
If this had come from an NFL coach, an NFL general manager, a former NFL coach or general manager, can you imagine the uproar? The NFL telling us what we are and what we aren't, and here we now have a general manager within the nine speaking his mind and coming out the wrong way with what he said. At some point, he's got to accept that this is just not the way you do things. That, granted, you may feel passionate about a lot of things, but some of them just don't need to be out there.
Despite what Ed Hervey wants, I believe we have not heard the end of this comment and this controversy.
If the CFLPA is pursuing this, and as we know they are, and they're going to be dogged about this, this is about their membership. In their commentary, they felt insulted. And if you do that to a group, they have every right to fight back. And this isn't them being petty. This is them protecting their people. The people that lay their bodies on the line, the people that make the spectacular catches, the game-winning field goals, the unbelievable throws downfield. This is the group that they're trying to protect. And Ed Hervey is going to be in for a fight with them. If he thinks that this is just going to go away quietly, I don't know if the CFLPA is going to walk out that door just washing their hands and saying, oh, let's forget about it.
Third down.
As you know, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are hosting the 2025 Grey Cup, and today, just prior to us getting together here to talk about this, the Blue Bombers had their official press conference launching the 2025 Grey Cup, and it was a great affair. They brought in a lot of the constituents in Winnipeg to speak to the media there. The key theme was about celebration and getting together and building friendships. That seemed to be the sort of the three tenets. You know that the Grey Cup game itself carries its own momentum. They were looking to see how they could influence that week before so that everybody feels welcomed in Winnipeg.
This is a much more uplifting story than the previous two that we've talked about so far in this episode. And a couple of big notes on that is the Blue Bombers organization, the City of Winnipeg, the Province of Manitoba have engaged the First Nations communities as well, the Manitoba Métis Federation, as well as the First Nations in the province. This is going to be a very inviting atmosphere for every football fan across Canada. A big thumbs up to the Blue Bombers organization for how they're going about this launch. And a big theme is the world's biggest social. For those not familiar with what a Manitoba social is, it really got its start as a wedding social. So in other parts of the country, they're a stag and doe party, something like that. So generally a couple of weeks or a month before a wedding, you throw a big bash. Everybody gets together. There's prize draws. It's to raise money for the couple. So not just on their wedding day, but this is another opportunity to kind of have a fundraising event for the couple to be married. That's carried out into other fundraising opportunities in Manitoba. So a social is a big party, a big dance, and it's an opportunity to really present that atmosphere to the rest of the country.
Winnipeg was out in front when it came to incorporating First Nations and Métis Nations into the football program. And, of course, they wore the Star Blanket W. They were the first team to bring that out. They have always been strong, and that's one of the things that organization has been really strong. With their president, Wade Miller, he has been really adamant about this, that Winnipeg is about the multicultural element that lives in and around that area. And he has always been firm about that, and to be credited for his forward thinking on this in some respects. The idea that the First Nations are actually kicking money into the Grey Cup to help become sponsors and help defray some of the costs is fantastic. And that shows that cooperation that can happen, that there are business enterprises that can work together.
It really shows the province-wide pride and ownership of the Blue Bombers organization. You talk about what Wade Miller and the team have done for initiatives to engage people. They have sent players to the remotest corners of the province of Manitoba to get players into schools in some of these fly-in communities to bring a connection for those kids to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as Manitoba's team, as the football team that everybody can cheer for. This is going to be a great event. I'm looking forward to it. Every city throws a great Grey Cup party. I don't know if anybody's ever said that they've experienced a bad Grey Cup week anywhere. This is a great chance to showcase Winnipeg. They've got a beautiful stadium, and this is an opportunity to shine.
And they want to shine. The Blue Bombers, of course, have been to the last 5 Grey Cups. they're kind of hoping, and there was a lot of joking at this press conference, that Wade had promised everybody there that the Blue Bombers were going to be not only the host city, but the host team. A lot of football between now and then to decide if that's going to happen. It is a reflection of what Winnipeg is about nowadays, because you've got the Winnipeg Jets who are doing well in the NHL. You've got the Blue Bombers. They're kind of riding high here with a couple of professional teams that are doing quite well. It's giving the city a lot of positive vibes, and you get a Grey Cup on top of that. Hey, that's pretty good.
One question for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beyond this 2025 season is who their starting quarterback is going to be. Reports are that there has been no contract extension. There's been no contract extension discussion between the team and quarterback Zach Collaros, whose contract is up at the end of this season.
It has raised some eyebrows in terms of why isn't that the Blue Bombers aren't talking with Zach Collaros. Now, granted, because of the tear in his finger in the Grey Cup, his rehab is still continuing on. And, of course, that's playing on his mind as he rehabs his way through to get ready for training camp. His age is a concern, too, because he is 36 years old. That shouldn't be a limiting factor, but it's a question. And I guess the Blue Bombers, Kyle Walters especially, is saying, we got to let him sort of sort this out and come to us a little bit on this. Does he want to continue? We haven't had an indication one way or the other if that's the way he wants to go.
I don't think there's much to read into this right now. I think that Zach Collaros is going to reevaluate his situation at the end of 2025 and see what his appetite for football is at the end of this season. There is a lot of pressure on the team to make it to the sixth straight Grey Cup because they are the host city as well. Beyond that, I don't see a need to press Zach for his football future before we've even opened training camps.
Walters also stated that they don't typically push for contract extensions in the offseason prior to the last season of the player that is playing. They usually deal with that once the season's over and they talk and they work out a deal. They did that with Willie Jefferson just this past offseason. So it's nothing unusual for them to go about this, but this is your franchise quarterback. There's been a lot of discussion about the drop-off between Collaros and who's ever next in that quarterbacking stable. If the Blue Bombers don't really know that he's going to be back for 2026, they've got to start working toward, well, are we really going to trust Chris Streveler, or are we going to have to start looking somewhere else? Maybe we've got within our lineup yet with Jay Patterson that maybe something's going to happen.
I'm 100% in agreement with you here. There needs to be a look to the future. Jake Dolagala, Shea Patterson, Chris Streveler are three guys that are currently under contract going into training camp. I don't anticipate all of them will be there come opening day roster. The team needs to look at not just a suitable backup for this season, but what they're going to do beyond that. I also feel that Kyle Walters and the organization has a lot of respect for Zach Collaros, and they're going to let him go about this in his timeline right now. I don't think there's an urgency to press him. Maybe they win the Grey Cup and he announces his retirement as the confetti's flying around the stadium. Maybe they don't make it to the Grey Cup game and he decides ahead of time he's walking away. Or maybe he's going to get fired up and think he's good for a couple more seasons beyond this. At this point, the ball is in his court and it needs to be led by Zach Collaros.
And that's what you typically do with somebody that's well-respected by management, well-respected within the locker room. You give them that space. You will let them figure it out and let them come to you. Kyle Walters, he has cap room, I'm sure, to deal with this, but that contract that Collaros has is fairly huge. And they've got to consider, too, if they are going to attract new talent to that team, that contract may have to come down a little bit to allow for that. How do you do that without insulting Collaros?
He's currently making about $600,000 a year on a 3-year deal. We see all the time quarterback contracts and star player contracts get renegotiated before the season to free up some cap space. Collaros himself has done that in the past with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as well. We saw some pretty big salaries leaving the team this season. I don't know if they really need to worry about that yet, but if there's an opportunity to get somebody, you want to keep some cap space available to use. We talk about the Bombers maybe being all in this year as the BC Lions were in 2024, and maybe that salary cap isn't as big of a concern for them because they're willing to go beyond that and pay the penalty.
Or look at this draft and say, well, we've got 2 quarterbacks that we could look at, maybe 4 after the Combine. Do they take a plunge in the first round and draft a Canadian quarterback?
They might as well draft them all, and then they can have the monopoly on up-and-coming Canadian quarterbacks.
I don't know if they could afford them all. The Calgary Stampeders are changing up the diet for their football players. And this comes after the report card from the CFLPA, which the Stampeders received a D- on the food that was provided to the team. And this was, of course, a review by the players. The Stampeders now are teaming up with the Calgary Flames, who have had a fairly good reputation with this, and they're going to change up the nutrition of their team with the help of the Calgary Flames. I think this is a great idea.
It is. I believe one of the comments from the players was cold pizza doesn't count as a lunch when you're feeding the team. Those report cards aren't put out to embarrass teams. They're put out to improve things. And this shows a great initiative by the Calgary Stampeders to correct something that they have fallen down in. You would love to see every team graded really high on all of the questions that come up in this player survey, but certainly you want to see teams take something seriously when obviously the players aren't happy with it. This is a step in the right direction for the Stamps.
Dave Dickinson kind of gave a little bit of a history lesson about this, and about 5 to 8 years ago, this wasn't a thing. Players were expected to take care of their own nutrition while they were with the team. The expectations have changed completely now that the team has that responsibility to do it for the players. I kind of prefer the team doing it for the players because you can control a little bit more what they're ingesting and imbibing. In the long run, I would trust would make them more resilient and feeling a lot better about playing.
A big part of this is you see the evolution of the professional athlete as well. You look back at the old days when a hockey player would hang up his skates at the end of the playoffs and not put them on again until training camp opened. Baseball players would go to spring training to get into game shape. Now you have to hit the field running and be in game shape from day one of camp. The expectations are that you look after yourself in that off season. A lot of them work with personal trainers, dietitians, strength and conditioning coaches as well to up their level of fitness and readiness. It should be on the team once the player arrives in your city and in your locker room to maintain that level.
The Stampeders are one of the first teams to get an all-inclusive area for the players to work out, have meetings, etc. They were out in front. Now it's becoming dated, and they've done some upgrades to fix all of that as well. There's been upgrades to the players' lounge, meeting rooms, coaches area, and the weight room, which has been altered or maybe restructured is a better word. These are types of things that the players want. When you're trying to sell a free agent on your team, one of the things you have to look at is the facility. Another thing that the Stampeders are doing, this has gone really quietly, although we have mentioned it, is that they're getting a brand new turf. That's going to be a real important issue for players is what am I playing on as a surface and how is my body going to react to it? And with the technology leaps that we've had in the last 25 years, these fields are getting better and softer all the time.
One more part of the equation is how families of players are treated by the teams and the organizations. You're not just selling a player on the locker room and the facilities, you're selling him and his family on your city and your organization. So it's a far cry from how professional sports were even 15 years ago, that now you have to take all of these things into consideration to make sure that your city is as attractive a destination as anybody else in the league.
You're also signing the family. Now, some families choose to live apart. The one member stays back home and runs the household. The other comes to play football. But a lot don't. A lot bring their families with, and that's the other change that we're seeing. Now, it's a bit of a tough lifestyle, especially if you're on 2-year contracts. You may be bouncing around. But if you sign up for it and you're willing to do it, then the team has to provide. They have to make it worth your while to be there, stay there, and make it comfortable for those people that are coming with you.
I look forward to seeing next year's player survey and see how much some of these areas have improved for the Calgary Stampeders.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit CFL.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.